Hey everyone, how's it going? I hope you're doing well. I'm doing well because today we're talking about music, but really we're talking about music I've never really listened to. So I've been watching a bunch of YouTube videos, a lot of other kind of music chit-chatters, and there's a lot of classic albums and classic artists that go around that I've never really heard. Maybe I've heard some of the hits, maybe I've never really heard them at all. And I started putting a list together. I thought I could do here's some albums I've never heard or some artists I've never checked out. Uh, Sad to say, it grew into quite a lengthy list of sometimes albums, sometimes artists, sometimes sort of a chunk of their discography. So then I got to thinking, okay, well, this is sadly a multi-video topic that I can divide into different portions. And my hope for this, I mean, there's a lot of albums out there that within, very niche communities, people are like, oh, you haven't heard blah, 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 or, very niche genres. And that's one thing you've never heard this, this thing by Frank Zappa. Oh, that's one of his best or something like that. So I put together a list of what I feel are a combination of just sort of culturally regarded as albums people kind of need to hear, need to listen to. It'd be I've heard these, but it would be like, oh, you've never heard Dark Side of the Moon, for example, or something like that. As well as kind of going through the list of genres and artists and albums that you'd figure someone like me, what does that mean if you don't know me personally? But someone like me has heard. So I went through, the punk and the ska and the prog rock and reggae and kind of hard rock, heavy metal, stuff like that for genres that I generally listen to and artists I should know about or should have heard or albums. And I put together my a top five. I called this one top five classic albums that I've never heard. And my hope is that each one makes you more and more angry as we go up the list of like, what? You've never heard that? I can't take your opinion seriously for anything now. Um, and maybe that's true. Or maybe it'll be the kind of thing you'll be like, oh, me neither. And that is a popular album. And the interesting thing too is there's no real reason why I haven't really listened to these albums. We have streaming. I could just easily, right before this video or right after, go listen to this album all the way through a few times, have an opinion on it, and I just haven't. I've just never gotten around to it. And I think maybe it's because these albums have such like a cultural importance or a cultural cachet that I feel like if I'm going to, to get into these albums or listen to them, I need to kind of know their context, know what came before and what came after, and all of this stuff that I really enjoy doing and like doing. But maybe that's what's causing me to hold off on getting into this. So number five is the classic album 10 by Pearl Jam. I know this is an incredibly highly regarded album, especially for grunge and modern rock. I've never heard it. I've heard some Pearl Jam hits. Never heard this album. In fact, I've never heard a Pearl Jam album all the way through. Some of these artists I've heard a lot of their discography, but not this. Never heard a Pearl Jam album. But I know 10 is sort of the big one to listen to. So that's number five. Number three, again, this one is one of those like me too for a lot of people. But Red by King Crimson. I know that's kind of considered one of their best, if not their best. A lot of people have it in their top three or top five. I've listened to I went through about six or seven King Crimson albums. They they have a lot of live albums, but in terms of their studio output, they've only got about 13. And Red being considered one of their best, I've never heard it. Heard a lot of their classics and some of their not so classics, but never heard Red. And I think for a lot of people who are like, but you're that prog guy or a prog guy or whatever. Yeah, never gotten to it. Sad to say. Number four is Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys. And I think the Beach Boys are, I've heard their greatest hits over and over and over again. I've heard songs about surfing and the beach and all of that. But I know how important Pet Sounds is as an album in terms of production and what it meant for the development of pop writing and songwriting composition and why Brian Wilson is such an important songwriter. Doesn't mean I've heard it. Again, heard some of the tracks from it, but I know it's actually those transitions between the tracks that makes that such an important album. So that's something I probably should be checking out. Following that, I have Appetite for Destruction by Guns N' Roses. Again, the three big singles. I've heard those. I think part of this for this one though is I don't really like Axl Rose's voice. In terms of the musical output, I like heavy metal, I like hard rock, so that's all well and good. But I've just never really enjoyed the voice enough to check it out. However, I know it's an incredibly important album in terms of what heavy metal and hard rock sounds like from the 90s moving forward. Never heard it. And the last one, which is sort of like a big one that, fans of all kinds of genres are into and have heard, and it's probably one of the biggest selling albums of all time. Well, I know it's one of the biggest selling albums of all time, is Rumors by Fleetwood Mac. Again, similar to, say, Thriller by Michael Jackson. It's the kind of thing, if you've never heard the album all the way through, you've heard a lot or all of the songs because of their releases and their features in pop culture and classic rock radio. And yes, I've heard a lot of these songs, but I've never actually owned a copy of the album. I've never sat down, listened to it in the sequenced order. And I know, again, super important album. And I wonder if part of that, though, is when you look at the Fleetwood Mac catalog, they have so many albums. It's not just the Stevie Nicks stuff. It starts with blues rock and it keeps going and it keeps going and keeps going. And I'm wondering, is Rumors the best place to start? It probably is. I don't know. But again, like these are all incredibly important albums for classic rock, for modern pop, for classic pop, for music in general. Maybe King Crimson Red, that's kind of more genre specific to my tastes. And there's other ones that I left off of this list, maybe for another video regarding different genres. But I consider that, a classic within progressive rock that I haven't heard. But otherwise, Pearl Jam 10, Beach Boys, Pet Sounds, Appetite for the Destruction, Red by King Crimson, and then Rumors by Fleetwood Mac. Never heard them. And that's a problem I could easily solve, but I've just never gotten around to it. So now I want your opinion. Which one of these should I start with? What's an album you haven't heard that everyone talks about all the time and you've just never bothered for whatever reason? Because we all got phones, we all have computers. I mean, that's presumably how you're watching this. Maybe, unless you're over there. Why is there some music we just don't get into, even if it's something that we'd like? I think I'd really enjoy King Crimson Red. I think I'd probably really enjoy all of these except maybe not the Guns N' Roses. So let's get that discussion going. What haven't you heard and what should I be checking out? Otherwise, I hope you have a great day and maybe leave some angry comments or some supportive comments. Catch you next time.